Hey, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of the Book and Pastor podcast. I am Scott.
And I'm Tyler.
All right. So now we know who we are. I think we're going to try to we're going to try a little bit of format this time. And so we're each going to talk about something we've been reading. Then we got a little subject to talk about. And then we'll see how our discussion goes. So Tyler's going to go first. So go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, so what I've been reading lately, and this fits into our discussion about how we approach reading, because I said I like to read in clusters.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've been reading lately is 3 books, which you can start to see. I'll hold up, well, you can see them better anyway. But 3 books that are all focused on mission and decolonizing mission. So I read them in this order. Harvey Kwiyani's Decolonizing Mission.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read Mekdes Haddis's A Just Mission.
Okay.
And then I read Randy Woodley's Mission and the Cultural Other. Have you read any of these?
I have not read any of them. I have read a little bit of Randy Woodley, a different book, but I maybe looked at 2 of his books. I'm not sure, but just dipped into them.
Yeah, I figured if there was any, it'd be Randy Woodley.
Yeah.
What books of his did you look at? Do you remember?
What is the name of? I can't come up with it on the top of my head.
Okay.
But what is? How did you come across these 3? Like, were other people reading these 3, or did one take you to the others?
I collected all 3 at different points. Just again, over the last number of years, as I've been more and more focused on missions, Christian mission, then these are things I've been collecting. And so, actually, this one, the Randy Woodley book, I got for free at the big Society of Biblical Literature conference.
Okay.
Where at the end of the conference, there's all these book tables, like this whole big arena full of book tables. And at the end, they often give them for quite a big discount. So I went to one table, and they're like, "We're just done. Take whatever you want." And so I just picked this up for free, which was great.
Nice.
But I knew of Randy Woodley, and I've read his, I think it's called Shalom and the Community of Creation.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that might be the one that I have looked at. I also think Indigenous Theology and the Western Worldview. I think that's the one that's based on his Hayward lectures at Acadia. So I've certainly seen some of the lectures if I haven't looked at the book itself.
Yeah. Okay. This one came out a couple of years ago, and this one made quite a splash as well. There's a whole bunch of controversy about it. I can talk a bit more about that. And
Sure.
then the Decolonizing Mission one, for the sake of full disclosure,
Yeah.
I work with Harvey. And I know
Yeah.
Harvey. And so this is with Harvey directs the Acts 11 project, which is the basically we're like a think tank trying to help people help the church understand what happens at the intersections of mission and migration. And so he published that book. And so, yeah, it's sort of a mixture. It's just been an interest. And so reading in clusters, this is one of the reasons why I do it, is because I found I understood each book better because of reading the other 2 alongside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read Harvey's first because we were doing like a webinar where we were going to talk to Harvey about it. And then to prepare for that, I wanted some further perspective. And so then I read Mekdes Haddis's A Just Mission, and then read Randy Woodley's book after that. And so all 3 of them are quite different. Harvey's book is more historical. He does like a whole bunch of chapters at the beginning which tell the story of how like the modern missions movement in the West developed and how it then has ties to colonialism. And then the last few chapters are like sort of taking particular issues in that and addressing them individually. The Mekdes Haddis book is much more contemporary focused and just going like, this is an issue, and here's the different ways that it's issues and what our responses to that should be. And then again, the Randy Woodley book is, somewhere in between. He's not really doing as much history, but he does do it a little bit. And so they all have a slightly different perspective. And one of my issues in reading like decolonizing mission and decolonizing theology type stuff, well, specifically with mission, is sometimes it sounds like they're saying the problem with mission is that it's mission.
Ha.
You know?
Right.
And it's like, well, yeah, that's not a place I can get to. Or like that I land Easily. I want to know what's wrong with mission. I don't want to jettison mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you?
Am I right? I think I looked at least one of your reviews on Goodreads of one of these books, and you also seemed to mention that it felt like there was sort of a caricature was presented, but also stuck with really steadily throughout, like that there was not really an openness to whether it's always been this way. Is that right? That was the
Yeah,
theory you
yeah.
got?
So that was on Randy Woodley's book, and I felt like one of my issues there, and by issue, I really want to say like things I'm continuing to think through.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Is that he seems to present caricatures of sort of substandard, subpar, suboptimal versions of Christianity, and then like rejects those and says like why those need to change and why they're inadequate. But I feel like in reading them, it's like, but I'm not part of a Christianity where that description fits. And I, at the same time, want to be open to saying maybe it fits better than I want to admit.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like I recognize it doesn't fit entirely.
Right.
And so, yeah. So on the one hand, from that, I think all three books are worth reading. For people who have like a similar background to myself, I think people will find all three of them troubling in a good way and in an uncomfortable way, and in the sense that you won't find yourself being able to agree with everything that's going on in them.
Right.
Yeah.
Does one of them work more as a kind of like with Harvey's being a historical one? Does that work more as an introductory one than the others do, or do they all kind of take an assumption that you might be reading your first piece of thinking through decolonizing theology or something?
Yeah, I would probably, I don't know if it's for that reason, but I think I would say that Harvey's book is the one to start with. And again, people can judge whether or not I'm saying that because I work with Harvey.
Right.
But it is definitely what I would say.
Yeah.
I think having a bit of that history, really, really helps. And then, the other two are just differently focused. And I think Mekdes Haddis's book takes a fair amount of, I don't know what the right word is. It says things that are, again, tricky in both ways. Mm-hmm. And all three of them do. But I don't know that that's the best starting point. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's roughly what I've been reading. So there you go.
Cool.
What have you been reading?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we talked about making plans last time and talked about my plans for the year. And in the midst of that conversation, you showed me your stack of Abdulrazak Gurnah books. And from all the interviews I've now seen with him, it seems you're saying his name correctly, by the way. Good job.
Shocking.
Shocking. You're always worried. You said, sorry, I'm going to mess this up, but it sounds exactly like everybody speaks to him with. And I think whether because of the time that Nobel Prize was awarded, or just the fact that it was in COVID, it's one that I usually pay attention to that. I did not know his name when you said it. And so I looked up afterwards and decided I would read Gravelheart, which you mentioned you were doing with a reading group. And so I did read that. But like you, I also picked up others. And so I'm now, I've finished Gravelheart and I'm reading Paradise, which is an earlier one. It's his third novel. I think you've read the first one or two now as well.
I'm currently, I read Memories of Departure, and I'm currently on Pilgrim's Way.
Yeah. And so this one came out in 94. I think it's after Pilgrim's Way. Yeah. And he was shortlisted for the Booker Prize for this one. Okay. And it was apparently his breakout novel, and when he started really getting noticed. And they're in some ways I've learned that his books mostly do deal with some of the relationship between this being I found it interesting. I listened to him speak about it. He said that he doesn't love the words immigrant or refugee, but prefers for himself the word stranger, because that gets at the experience that he had as an 18-year-old leaving Tanzania or Zanzibar for the UK, as that feeling of not being where you know how to live. And there's a great line in Gravelheart about wanting to to be somewhere where you know how to live. And so I felt like reading that book and then starting this one, which takes place much earlier. The Gravel Heart book is basically the 70s to the early 2000s, telling the story of this 18-year-old boy who has some mystery about his family situation, goes to the UK to study, and ends up kind of making a life there. The Paradise, from what I gather, because I've not gotten this far yet in it, but it starts in pre-colonial times, and so it goes through the period when the colonizers come and the change in life, from the difficulties in the pre-colonial life to the difficulties in colonial life. So I'll look forward to continuing with that. I find him just to be a really good writer to listen to. What's your experience been so far with like just how I find it measured and slow, kind of in a good way?
Yeah, so I was trying to think of like descriptors for his prose and didn't come up with anything. So I think maybe he has unobtrusive prose, as in like you're just getting the story, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe that fits. Because I read there's a fourth book of his. Technically, it's more of a booklet. But after the Nobel Prize, they published his speech along with two other short things, which is actually how I first encountered him.
Okay.
Because I just found it on a bookstore counter. And I have a major problem with pocket-sized books. I love them. And I buy them all.
Right, you do.
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. So then I got that. It's called Map Reading. And he talks in there about, in his speech. Well, did you watch the speech? The Nobel
Not
Prize
yet,
speech?
no.
Okay. Well, I've read it and not listened to it. Maybe the movie's better than the book in this case. But he talks about like the sort of state of pure writing, like unintentional or like unconsidered, and how like as kids he talks about, actually it's the phrase, I wrote in a straight line.
Huh.
You know? And so I feel like that's obviously a bit of an ideal for him. And it's definitely one of the impressions of reading his novels, is that you're left with, I think, the novel rather than his voice as a writer. Does that make sense, or is that an insult?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I totally agree, because I think that even if there's not which there's not a flashy style or an obtrusive one, like unobtrusive, I think is true, but I think there is, there's a thoughtfulness to it that feels like if you read it sentence by sentence, you can, and they're not very big books. I think that's another thing, is when I notice somebody writes these 200 and something page books, that you can afford to feel like you can slow down and read it slowly. So like I just found the page where that line about knowing how to live comes, and just read it out loud and see if you think like, because I don't think it's not got a style kind of, but he's talking about this is the protagonist's father telling him the story of the time when he moved or was asked to move away from home. He says, my sisters, both younger than me, also pleaded with me to go. They wanted their beloved brother to come with them. It would not be the same without me. They would lose me if I stayed behind. I listened to them and shed tears with them and felt chastened, but I refused to leave. I tried to explain, but did not know how to make them understand that I did not want to lose my freedom to be where I belonged, where I knew how to live. And there's something about the rhythm of those, like the phrases between the commas and so on, that just I find to be quite rewarding. The other thing I noticed is when I finished the book, I went back and reread the first chapter immediately, and that was a really helpful thing. And
why did you do that?
Because as I often find in the beginning of a book, you are starting in the middle of stuff. You don't know who everyone is. You're trying to find your way, right? Within a few chapters, you usually find your way. The story settles in and focuses. But something about it, the way that characters had developed, the way that particularly the father had come into the story, I decided I'm going back to the beginning and see what the relationship between these family members looks like. And I find, just by flipping back to the first page, the line, "My father did not want me," is the opening sentence. And I thought, after reading the book, that has so much more meaning than
Yeah.
it did at the beginning. And that also made me think his writing, when you get away from the granular level of like, what does the sentence look like? How is the story structured and how does it get conveyed to you? And I looked at, in that first chapter, I just thought, man, I could read this whole thing again now, and I think it would be a different experience than it was the first time.
Okay.
So,
So the reason I asked is I've now had a practice where when I finish a novel, I reread the first chapter every time.
do you really?
So I just wondered if this had come up and if we had
Nope.
come to it together like 6 months ago and I just forgot that it was your idea all along.
Oh, it's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so Pilgrim's Way is similar to Gravelheart in the sense that it is the story of a migrant, like
Yeah.
of someone who's moved to the UK, where memory of departure, just memory of departure is not.
Mm.
And it's still quite a different book, but yeah, no, I think, I'm thinking of the contrast in his prose style, or what I mean is the contrasting examples are like Herman Melville or P.G. Wodehouse.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like reading Moby-Dick. I just remember going like, this man is a master of this, like this language, and every page has a sentence that it's like, how do you even do that? That's so good. And then Wodehouse is absurd. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think P.G. Wodehouse is showy on purpose because it's part of the experience. Showy without that necessarily being like, a morally detrimental characteristic.
Right.
And Melville is, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's like heavy-handed versus unobtrusive without heavy-handed being negative. But
And I also wonder if it's partly to do with the times, like especially with Melville in the 1800s. There is more of a tendency to be, and I don't want to say that he's flowery, but some could be flowery, especially in the century before that. But maybe there was more of a sense of like grandeur and stuff of the way you tell your story.
yeah, so actually, I think this makes Abdulrazak Gurnah a good author to recommend because, like
Yeah.
you're saying, the novels are short, and I think they read like pretty straightforward.
They do.
Where like this is a name I know I can't pronounce. African author who passed away last year, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, something like that.
I've never known how.
Yeah, I mean you cannot recommend his novels just like on a blank slate.
Okay.
Like some of them are so bonkers, like, and some of them are super long and just difficult. Where I mean, I've read 2.5 of his because I read Gravelheart quite a few months ago now.
Yeah.
But I feel like, yeah, I have a sense that Gurnah's novels are all like this. And actually, I wonder by the end because I've got another. I'll reread Gravelheart, and then I've got another 3 to read through after Pilgrim's Way. I wonder if it'll get dull.
Yeah, I wonder the same. I picked up a book. I saw one of his books, Dottie, which is After Paradise,
Oh yeah,
was on Amazon for like $7 new. So I bought that one just because that was way cheaper than the others. So we'll see. I'm going to try and do a few in the next little while too, and we'll see. We will report back.
yeah. Also, we will move on here, but
Yeah.
I do not love these covers. So after the Nobel Prize, they like re-released all of his, and all of them.
Right.
I mean, all of mine are in this same set. They all say Nobel Prize 2021
Yeah.
on the cover, but I feel like, I mean, a professional designer did this. I'm sorry to whoever did it. I don't love it. I feel like it doesn't fit all that well. Not a fan.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how much. I think about the aesthetics of a book probably more than you. Do you think that's true?
If we're talking about tactile aesthetics, like I think you think about the way it feels because you're against paperbacks, but like I think about I actually like the cover of Gravelheart. Like I like the red, yellow, and green. I feel like it gives us this, with the city. I don't know. This one I like. Some of the others I'm going to look more closely at them. I know what you mean though. There's definitely a similar approach to all of them.
Yeah. And I will say, in my defense, I'm more against paperbacks because of their lack of intrinsic lasting power than I am because of the way they feel. So
yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
we want to talk as well about processing reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think this is something that I've probably thought more about the last few years because of you. because I've gone through more periods of time where it's just like I'm just going to read and read and read and read. And like there was a year I think we both tried to read 100 books, you know, and
You succeeded. I did not.
well, we didn't need to say that, but you can say that.
Still my biggest reading year ever because of that.
Okay.
I was
Yeah,
past 90.
But
so,
what is it
yeah.
worth? That's why we're talking about the process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I've wondered more and more about this. So what are you doing currently to process reading?
Not enough. I always read with I'm going to say I don't always read fiction with a pencil in hand. Mostly I do. Everything else I do read with a pencil in hand. So I was looking at my, to find that quote, for instance, in Gravelheart, it's a library copy, but I still, there were some things that struck me enough that I did my usual thing, which is just to put a pencil mark beside the passage that I want to go back to. And then I just made a little list of the pages that I had such pencil marks on. The idea being then I could go back and either copy them over into a page that says Gravelheart so that I've got something to remember about it. But the thing is often it's sort of, I get halfway there. I do the marking in the book. I maybe look back at a couple of them, but I don't always, well, most of the time, I don't take that step to then sit down and say, here we go.
Yeah. So let me go to two things. One is just to point out that we both have library copies. So shout out to libraries, even as two people who love buying books and who have bought a ton of books. Libraries are fantastic things. Also, shame on you for writing in a library book.
Ha! It's a pencil. I can erase it at the end, and I usually do.
I know. And I believe that you go looking for every mark possible. I believe that, and you do your best. But
I do.
Yeah. Somebody, what's the thing where you do at? Like at Mr. Swift. Somebody at Halifax Public Library on this video so they can hunt you down.
There you go. So this is the thing. It's funny. I try with public library stuff to leave them unmarked more than with university library stuff. University libraries, I assume, like so many of them have like 10 people's writing already in them. And so I'm like, I get to add to the conversation.
Add to the conversation. Yeah, totally off topic. Over the years, I've bought like used books from like professors, biblical studies type stuff, and then gone through and found some of their notes. And I think I have, whatever it is, I have like one of these major works on the Spirit. I think it might be James Dunn's work, but I have the copy that was used by another prolific New Testament scholar to write the review for it, including like loose sheets of paper stuck inside still.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember who it is, but
oh man.
Anyway, okay, so you are like collecting quotes.
Yeah, so sometimes the note at the back will not just have a page number, but have what it was that struck me about it. So the purpose of it then would be, often it's just passages, and because I wouldn't say it's quotes because they're usually longer than a sentence.
Okay.
They're enough that if I read through them, I kind of, when I've done it carefully in the past, I might end up with, 5 or 10 pages of handwritten stuff from a book. And reading through those again in preparation for a book group or just to remember it has actually brought most of the book back for me because they were significant enough. And that's the goal, I think, for me, is to have a place where I can still access much of what the book either gave me in terms of thought or made me feel in terms of reaction.
Yeah. So I've shifted because for a long time I use Evernote on my computer.
Right.
And I would keep notes on there, and then because then I can just like go back through and I can search them all, and I've got this enormous file with, most of the books I've read over the last number of years.
Yeah.
But recognizing, I just wanted to touch my computer less, or like maybe better said, have it touch me less.
Yeah.
Especially in leisure time.
Yeah.
And then also wanting to do more reflection, I'm back to writing in a notebook. And so I'm not writing out quotes. There is some stuff that I have that will be like, I'll note a page where there's something I think I'll want to go back to.
Yeah.
But so like all the quote collecting I do is for this feature for the Book and Pastor blog, which you get to say out loud. The Latin title is
Sententiae Bene Notandi.
well done. Yeah, I'm
All
sure
right.
you're right. I don't have a clue.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, which means for those who don't speak Latin like myself, basically, like sentences well noted. It's sort of like a, hey, this is a good one. You know, or these things should be seen. Something like that. Fair?
Yeah.
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 So I collect quotes, but there's a rule on that for me, which is it cannot be more than one sentence.
You want to know why I haven't participated? That's why.
I know.
Most of my quotes, and I think you once in a while broke it and did a two-sentencer. Am I right?
If it's more than 3 times, I'll be shocked. Shocked.
Okay.
You know me. I'm all
Sometimes
about
rules.
I set myself a rule, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I have found quotes that are, 2 sentences and thought, this one, maybe. No, it's still too long for Tyler.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what I do. But what I'm trying to do now is actually just like sit and think and write more often, because I'm noticing one of my big problems. This is how great and easy my life is, because this is one of my big problems, is that because I read for leisure, but then a lot of the work, like all the vocational work areas of my life, all relate to my reading practices in some way.
Right.
And so I am like years ahead of what I should produce based on the reading that I've done. But I can't stop reading because it's what I do for leisure. So like after I finished Memory of Departure, I think I finished it in like an evening. And so then the next morning, instead of starting, because it was on a weekend, the next morning, actually it was a Saturday, and then it was Sunday morning, and I had like 45 minutes before I had to finish getting ready for church. And I was like, I'm not going to start the next book. I'm going to sit and think about this book and write things down about it. Right. And so that's actual like real reflection. And so also just the act of handwriting, I think is better. And hopefully this stuff, it needs to get into production for my vocational life in different ways still.
Yeah, but I feel the same way. That when you were talking about that, it resonated with me as a big part of I can never sit for 45 minutes on a Sunday morning before church and just either start a new book, or because I'm preaching every Sunday. But of course that means that in some ways, like all of my, both of us in a sense are reading for our work. Mine involves this one piece of production every week that is a reflection on a text, but then there's so much else where I'm like, but it would be great to get something out of that. Yeah. So for me, even though I'm missing the handwritten part of it with this, I think one of the things for me is saying with Goodreads or just other books I'm reading, to start saying, okay, what if you were going to try and write at least some form of a review of this where you evaluate what you got from it, And I think for me that becomes a part, and maybe to have it less be about it's good or it's not good, than to start processing it that way, even as a beginning.
Yeah, I used to do more on my Goodreads, and I at some point got busy and started doing less and haven't gone back to it. I don't know if that's the avenue that will work for me. Mostly because there I really want to tell people like read this or don't read this. Yeah. And then these other kinds of reflections. For me, the ones I was doing about Memory of Departure were really focused on what is this book anyway? Like what's it doing? Like what are the sort of levels to it? Yeah. I think actually another thing that I do to help with this is I don't use bookmarks anymore. And so I've always got to find the place I stopped reading. Right. You sort of skim back through again and find your way. So
there's a movie called Perfect Days. A couple of years ago it came out by Wim Wenders is the director, but it has to do with this Tokyo toilet cleaner. And we basically are watching his routine every day, and reading is a part of it. And it's interesting that every night he gets back, like he lives in a sort of a very old kind of way in the contemporary world and in a very technology driven world in Tokyo. But he listens to cassette tapes in his car or whatever. But then he sits at home and reads in the evening, and he has shelves worth of books. But then the next morning, what he does before he gets up, we see him look back because he flips the book this way before he goes to bed. And then the next morning, before he goes to work, you get the idea that what he's doing is reading what last he read last night so that it's back in his head for the next day. And it's interesting as you talk about like having to go back and find your place because you haven't just saved it. That
Yeah.
came to mind, that image of like, what would it be to, revisit the last page or two you read every time you started back with a book,
Yeah. Well, and I think this idea of going back to read the first chapter helps as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So we're just about we are out of time, but do you have a quote for us?
yes. So, and mine, I've got the page saved. This is why I had Pilgrim's Way. So
Yeah.
this, and again, it is a one sentence thing. I could make reference to more, but the line is, his whole culture was under threat from eating bread and tinned mackerel, which is great. And so what's going on here? The main character is Daoud, and he's in conversation with a nurse because he works at a hospital. And the nurse is somebody who spent time in Africa. And so he sets up this beautifully troped scene where like the white person who's been to Africa knows better than the African about Africa. And so there's this great tone about how she's, helping him recognize how everything's gone wrong and all the things. And so, he, in this book, he's got Daoud as the main character. You also somewhat get his like first person view in the narrative, in the prose itself. And so the longer bit, it turned out also that the soul of the black man was being destroyed by smoking and drinking, is the line before. And so there's this sort of sarcasm about it. And then anyway, so I liked it just as part of one of those like troped moments where the white person who visited Africa knows better than an African. And it shows a lot of what Gurnah does, because he just evokes this whole layered thing. Because on the one hand, it's like, actually, like flooding African like food markets with English food is bad, right?
Yeah.
But he's just, on the other hand, it's like, well, who's she to decide for him whether or not he should eat tinned mackerel?
Right.
And so like evoking that whole sort of complex in that conversation, epitomized in that line, which probably doesn't evoke enough of it on its own. That's
but
what I captured that.
You've given us enough to have a sense of it. And I got to say, though, back to thinking about Gurnah's writing, is that itself, even like to be doing third person narration and yet to get us inside his head reflecting on what he's just heard, that's a pretty interesting technique to be able to convey all that while having it in third person narration, because it's not like he's telling us this is him, laughing at her or whatever, but we get the sense of all the thoughts going on in his head and the ridiculousness of it. So
maybe next time, after we've both read more Abdulrazak Gurnah, maybe we talk mostly about Gurnah next time.
Yeah, sure, sounds good to me. All right, I think that's it for us, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Great, thanks everyone.
Yeah.